Thank you for the introduction. Yeah. Thanks for coming, everyone. So this is the Navigating the Above Ground Therapy Space Access, Practices, and Harm Reduction panel. So we're going to be talking about like above ground, like psychedelic therapy, psychedelic facilitation. My name is Brian. I'm going to be the moderator. I'm going to try to do the least amount of work possible today. So ideally, all our panelists can just speak about what they want to speak about and ask each other questions, ask the audience questions. And if things slow down, I also have a bunch of questions. So yeah, like I said, my name is Brian Ebert. I'm a ketamine-assisted psychotherapist at Catalyst Insight Collective. And if we just want to have people introduce themselves, I don't know who wants to kick it off.
Okay.
You want to? Okay.
Okay. Hi, my name is Shireen Ganatsabadi. I am I like to name myself a Persian Celtic mystic. But I guess the thing that allows me to hold clinical space, I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. I work with Brian at Catalyst Insight Collective. Have done numerous psychedelic trainings that have been, to say the least, interesting. Um, and yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I love plant medicine, psychedelics, healing with people, healing with the earth, allowing the wisdom of the earth to really guide my process and hold space with people. So, yeah.
Thanks, Shireen. Hi, my name is Ian McClune. I'm a therapist and co-founder of Expanse, Minnesota. I am an addiction therapist and an advocate for harm reduction practices, and trying to advocate for access to psychedelic therapies for anyone who wants it.
Hi, my name is Aize. It's my above ground credentials. Have a master's in clinical psych since 2003. I've taught and started a training program at Star King School for the Ministry for psychedelic assisted ministry training. I am on Berkeley Center for Psychedelic Programs, multidisciplinary online open course. And I've taught at CIIS and someplace else. I can't remember, but yeah, I've been involved with a lot of the above ground training programs as well as. But the majority of my training comes entirely from the underground, and I know we're not supposed to talk about it, but if we can.
My name is Terry Togger. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with Hennepin County Adult Behavioral Health. And what I do is broker services, mental health services, and substance abuse services, and community supports for people with mental health disorders and substance abuse. I also have lived experience with addiction, and I have been able to put methamphetamine and alcohol use disorder into complete remission with this medicine.
Hi, I'm Courtney Amundsen. I'm the founder of Mindful Restoration. My background's in eco-psychology. I specialize in neurofeedback, QEEG, so brain mapping, looking at the electrical activity of the brain. I'm trained in mind-body medicine, and the medicines really brought me here since I can remember now, but I'm just realizing it. I'm a veteran and of the Air Force, and so that has played a huge role in kind of how I got here.
So illustrious crew be amongst. My name is Roz McMillan. I'm a licensed clinical social worker at Doorway Therapeutics, and we do BIPOC community work, above ground and ketamine assisted therapy, and I also have lived experience as a recovering person, and have used rituals and spirituality for my healing, and then eventually medicine. Yeah, that's enough.
Okay, so just real quick, so just some of the terminology that we're going to be using. So a lot of the questions have the word psychedelic in them. Just want to acknowledge that it is a colonial word. So that's just the kind of space that we're operating in, is this Western therapeutic model. There's a lot of problems within that model, and we'll probably get to some of those today. And, I'll be using the word therapy a lot. It can be any sort of like above ground facilitation. And, that can be a little limited now, but that's going to be changing. And we'll be talking about that as well. So I think one of the things that we are tasked with is just to talk about access. So I'm just curious to kick it off with just who might be a good fit for psychedelic therapy and how do they find this treatment? Any takers?
Hello. So I think that people with treatment resistant depression, I find that they do well with these medicines. I think end of life. I had a person who was at end of life, and it seemed to really help her with her resolve and to kind of navigate that space for herself. So those are the two areas that I've noticed that it's done well with.
One of the populations I love to work with are folks who struggle with eating disorders, and especially folks where the modern westernized way of treating eating disorders does not work for them, which is actually a majority of people. I have seen ketamine as well as other medicines really create space for them to even just touch parts of themselves that they can't because the protector part of the eating disorder is in the forefront. And ketamine and other medicines are just the gentleness of it helps them move through it. So I would say folks with eating disorders as well can benefit.
Another population that we're really focused on is addiction. If you think about it, any kind of major behavior change is really difficult, right? To go from something that feels really fixed and stuck to something different that requires a sense of freedom or hope or possibility. The Western approaches to treating addiction have been really limited in their efficacy. And I think one of the exciting areas of these medicines is opening up a space for shifting, for possibility, for change, and to kind of jumpstart a new way of living. And so that's an area that I think probably all of us here are pretty passionate about.
I want to piggyback on Ian. The treatment, the drug and alcohol treatment industry is worth like $50 billion currently, and that's often profit driven. It's disease model focused, and the data and around outcomes and long-term success is mixed. So I think this medicine has an opportunity to come in and really make a difference, but that system is pretty structured and rigid, and I think it needs to be challenged. We look at chemical health more broadly as in terms of an expression of health and what we put into our bodies, whether it's prescriptions or chemicals and compounds that we experience on a day-to-day basis.
All right, so next question. So what do you envision access looking like as psychedelic therapy becomes more available? And also, what about for people that have been marginalized, disenfranchised, or harmed by the Western therapeutic model?
Does that one work? Yeah, it works. So as you all know, Lykos just got slapped down by the FDA, and I'm one of the few people that thinks that was a good move. I think, above ground therapists have gotten to this collusion with legality, as though the best practices, the best methodology, the best treatment models are all legal. And as an African American who's grown up in the United States for his entire life with, who has health insurance, I can say that like the medical model does not care about Black bodies or Black minds, right? So I'm not necessarily interested in whether or not something's decriminalized or legalized. I am interested in what are best practices. And those best practices, I was trying to see how long I could talk about therapy without talking about spirituality, but I can't do it. I can't do it, y'all. I keep trying. It doesn't work. Right? Like, and I always say this, and it sounds like I'm joking, but I'm not. I think like psychedelics confined to psychotherapy is like an adolescent being reduced to the diet of an infant, right? Like psychedelics can offer so much more. Like I think addicts are some of the most spiritual people like on this planet, and I think a lot of the pain and a lot of the suffering that goes on is this spiritual hunger that the West has sort of just cut people off from. And what we do instead is we try and feed the psyche as though the psyche can compensate for the spirit. And it can try really hard. But I think for a lot of people, we understand that there is more to us than just our own biological existence. And there's more to us than just what we remember or what we forget, that we are connected to a larger sphere of influence. And I think psychedelics can help with that. How people gain access to that, I think, is by having more trusted people in their circles that they can rely on to, at the very least, have conversations with about. So when my black barber is asking me about mushrooms, whereas 5 years ago, he was like, get that shit away from me. I think that's more about access than whether or not Medicare will pay for ketamine treatment. You see what I'm saying? Like, so I think like there's sort of different tracks that we're playing on this, and I'm less interested in that corporate medical track.
I really appreciate that. I also think that it's and both. Or, you know, like the discussion also has to happen in both directions, but I really think what you were talking about is having conversations as providers as well, and being able to recognize that there's a problem, or there's health issues in the health system, right? There are providers who can also benefit from the psychedelic therapy or the psychedelics in general, and continuing that conversation with even primary physicians, right? And how they're talking about it with children, right? When I bring my daughter in for an appointment and her doctor's like, no to drugs. And I'm like, what? I got to switch doctors? Shit, I thought I had a good one, right? It's like having conversations when it feels uncomfortable and continuing to have them with people who also hold power, right? Going to your physician, there's a power dynamic there that also needs to be addressed. And it starts with people who, sit in, I'm a white-bodied woman, and so I feel a responsibility to be a part of that conversation, identify when I feel uncomfortable, but still be there.
Right.
Sorry, just to popcorn one more thing on that. And I think this is what's unique about psychedelic assisted therapy as opposed to other forms of therapy. If the therapist hasn't done their own work, especially with psychedelics, they're actually more likely to do harm than good. Naropa, that was the other place I've worked with. Naropa, CIIS, like, I've worked with all of them. And, you can have a training module and you can read the literature and you can go to the video, but until you're actually doing your own work, I'm not referring people to you. 100%. And even folks who are doing the work, like, we haven't even talked about the compounds. Like right now, we're talking like ketamine, MDMA, and mushrooms are all the same. Even the clinical trials. I talked to Tony Bossis over at NYU. I was like, Tony, all of your studies are about psilocybin. I'm like, bruh, I've been doing this shit since like the 90s. I've never had access to psilocybin. I have access to mushrooms. Mushrooms have more than psilocybin in them. They have a composite effect. So I'm sitting here like, I can't trust your research. And he's like, what? I'm supposed to just like get people to test on mushrooms? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh shit, actually that's a good idea. You see what I'm saying? So like that's where the research is, and that's like best practice. That's where we're taking our best practices from. They are so behind the underground, I know we're not supposed to talk about it, that it's hard for me to take them seriously.
The only reason why I'm a therapist is because I'm a recovering addict, and I was an outreach worker in the 80s, and I was working in an outreach community, and they wouldn't let me go any further in the system unless I got a degree. And so then I went and got a master's degree. But I do this I do my work as a therapist from my lived experience as a as a black person, a black woman, knowing that I've always had to be treated in a way that nobody really understood me, and that I had to become somebody that could be trusted in my community, so that when they saw me, they could relax and be themselves. And then from there, I can work with them around where they want to go. So I'm not an advocate of medicine. I don't say, oh, everybody needs to have medicine. What I say is, let's figure out how you can be yourself enough to decide what you want to do with your life. And most people that I work with, when I sit across the chair from them as a therapist, don't know what they want, because they're used to being what they think they're supposed to be because of this society and the way that it is.
Just kind of touching on what you had said about, I tried not to bring spirituality into like the therapy mix. To me, that's another important piece of being a therapist. I come from a culture where hundreds and hundreds of years ago, our doctors, our healers, things like that, were very spiritual people, right? So they tapped into their spiritual religious self to create some concepts that are still used in the medical field today, right? So a couple people, Avicena and Al-Razi, were two very spiritual people who contributed significantly to the medicine world, or the medical world in the Western world today. And so I think part of, for me, doing this work, whether it's with medicine or not, is reintegrating spirituality or the spirit aspect of ourselves into the therapy world as well. And just naming that as like seeing people be like, oh, okay, I can talk about this stuff in like my therapy session that insurance is paying for is important. So
Yeah, and I think too that there is always going to be a space for the underground. I know plenty of people who would who will always prefer to do underground work, to be doing underground work, to receive underground work. But I also think that having an above ground access model is a way to provide additional access to people who do feel maybe more at home in that kind of medical model system. I mean, I was talking to a relative who said that they would feel that felt safer to them. Absolutely. Right? And so to that end, one of the things that we've really done with a great intention at Expanse is to provide the work in a context that even PMAPs will pay for happily, so that people can have access that otherwise feel shut out due to financial barriers.
PMAP systems are Medicaid systems for people that are economically disadvantaged.
Thanks.
All right, I'm wondering if we should maybe take a step back. So do people like know what we talk about when we say psychedelic therapy? Can I get any feedback from the crowd? Like, do you know what that means? Okay, yeah. Do we need to like define it or talk about what it looks like or anything like that? Okay, yeah. So like I wonder like if anybody wants to speak to like what's the psychedelic part, like what's the therapy part, like either in isolation, and then how do they commingle?
Our model is we do integration and preparation. We do a preparation session. We do a preparation sessions, and then we'll do a medicine session, and then we'll do integration sessions. And to me, the most important session is the integration session, and how to use the material that happened in the preparation and the actual medicine session to integrate that, or to bring that to the life of the person, so that they can take that and live it as they go from the medicine. But I know the medicine is important, but I believe that the integration, I'm still integrating sessions that I've had since like 5 years ago. I'm still integrating sessions. And also, I think it's important for folks to do their own work and do their own medicine work, not only individually, but in community. So at Doorway Therapeutics, where I work as in our practice as a practice, but I also do clinical supervision, and I emphasize with the people that I train is the most important work they can do is their individual work. Then we do work together as therapists, and to stay in community as therapists. I believe the worst thing that a therapist can do is be isolated and not have community to work with and to work their things out, to build community as therapists. And then to parallel that with the work that we do in the community for our clients.
Yeah, I think that kicks off one of my questions, so thank you. So I know this is something I was confused about for a super long time because I feel like everybody just says the word and nobody ever talks about what it is, and that's getting better, I think. But like, what does integration mean, and what role does it play in psychedelic therapy?
I actually don't like the term integration. I feel like it brings up some like 60s civil rights shit, which is weak sauce. Yeah. Yeah, like it just. Well, I borrow from, clinical anthropology and all these other things, meaning making. Like, what is the meaning like, a lot of times when people are like having journeys, they're like, oh, I see my mother, that must mean that I have unresolved mother issues. And I'm like, shut up and just have your journey. Like, stop trying to like make meaning of it in it. Like, that's not like hyper to like intellectualize. Like, drop in, like, be where you are, like, have that full experience. And then afterwards, allow for meaning to come, knowing that in general, meaning is not fixed. Right? That like something that means one thing like 1 week out of a journey is going to mean something different 1 month out of a journey. It's going to mean different like 1 year out of a journey, right? Like allow yourself like in my opinion, one of the things that psychedelics do that's useful in this society is allow for non-rational states. Right? We need non-rational states. They're important to our psyche as human beings, right? The meaning making invites us to go back into that non-rational state again and again and again. What does that dream mean? Right? Every time you remember that dream, you are reliving that dream. So every time you're trying to make meaning of your journey, you're going back into the journey. That's extremely useful in a very rigid society that says X has to equal Y all the time. So integration is, how do you understand what happened? How do you continue to make meaning of what happens? And then like, how does that meaning change over time? That's how I see integration.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I always think about it as like tending the fire. So when I think about like medicine work or psychedelic therapy, plant medicine therapy, I like to look at it as if I'm like building a fire, right? So the preparation that comes beforehand is like gathering the supplies, gathering the kindling, the wood, whatever else we're needing to like actually create the fire. The medicine work itself, right, is that like spark that ignites the fire. It's that initial flame. And then the integration or the meaning making, love that, is how we're maintaining that fire to keep burning, right? And so constantly keeping an eye on it, being intentional with what we're putting into the fire. Is it air? Is it the wood? Do we need to get some water to simmer it down a little bit? And if, for me, like I always like to have a fire, a candle burning. And so it's how do I continue to maintain this inner flame within me? And that meaning making integration is like what's maintaining it. So that's the idea or the concept that I like to use when I think about integration.
I look at the trauma experiences and how those are integrated. Often people with trauma experiences depersonalize those events. They're fragmented, and the integration or the meaning making of those experiences allow for an absorption of those experiences into the collective self. The ego deflation is we were able to repair, I think, our sense of what self is and what those experiences were. I think that's a really big piece of recovering from an addiction. The trauma and addiction often are commingled in such a way that if the trauma is not resolved, neither will the addiction.
I think also what you're speaking to is a sense of belonging, and people need to feel safe enough to whatever space they're walking into, to feel safe enough, and that means coming back to like, you know, doing the work both ways and in community.
I'm trying to decide what question to ask next. I have a couple note cards set aside. Does anybody have anything they want to speak to that I'm not asking them?
Good job.
Keep doing it? Okay. I think some people might be curious, like what happens in these psychedelic therapy trainings? I know many of us have done these to certain extents. Like what works well and what really doesn't?
Go on, Ross.
No, I had a horrible experience. I didn't like my my training. I thought that it was dismissive of indigenous and spirituality. I'm not a science chick, so the whole sciencey thing, I didn't do well, even though I understand that it's important. I thought it was extremely racist, and it didn't include indigenous, black, and women, and I was traumatized pretty much.
Really sorry to hear that. And also, and Shireen and I just were talking about this morning because we did separate programs. I'm currently in the Naropa program you mentioned.
Okay.
Probably shouldn't say that, but and finished the MAPS Lycos program. And my experience was much different and has been much different. I feel really grateful. There's people in this room, Indigenous leaders and BIPOC people, and people from the LGBTQI community that I have gotten to learn from and be in group with, and that has been central to the work. It's the foundation, and I'm really grateful for that. Not perfect. There's areas for growth within that program, but I will say that is that social location has been emphasized throughout the program, almost like every single time that we even start conversations, and I think that that's a really imperative piece in the training.
So my training is not with those programs, but the trainings that I've received, just a general, like a little bit of them, involved a lot of shutting up, a lot of listening, a lot of cleaning up puke buckets, a lot of taking people to the bathroom and washing their asses, a lot of holding people while they were crying or screaming or yelling, a lot of like holding people while they were crying, like holding physically people when they were crying. So a lot of making food. My training was incredibly humbling, and I didn't finish the. I always joke. I say I've like failed 5 initiations. Like I've left like a bunch of different initiations because it got to the point where I was like, okay, like this is not the community that I'm going to be with forever, but I appreciate this. So my training were always very spiritual trainings. The psychotherapy part, like I have a master's in divinity and I have a master's in clinical psychology. And I always joke, I feel like everybody who was in the master's of divinity program wanted a master's in clinical psych, and those that were in clinical psych wanted a master's in divinity. So I got trained before there were training programs, and I just had to do both in order to truly get it. But having taught in some of these training programs, they're very they're very head focused, right? They're very like, this is the literature about this, and then there are people who are talking to you, but practicals. In fact, I can say this: the Berkeley Center for Psychedelic Programs, like they took folks down to Oaxaca, and I learned this from people who are in the program, but they didn't let them do mushrooms in Oaxaca. How you gonna let people go? That don't even make no sense, right? But again, it's just like a legal question of like, well, we're getting federal funding, or we're not allowed to give people that. And I'm like, well, that's all well and good, but don't you dare tell these people that they're okay to sit for other folks if they have, if you, you know, like it just doesn't make any sense. And then just like one time, when I work with people, I tell them like, if you're going to work with medicine for other people, you need to work with that medicine for yourself at least 5 times. One time in which it's a really good experience, one time in which it's a really bad experience, one time when nothing happens, and 2 other times, and then you can begin to start sitting with other people on that, right? Like that's the way that I work with folks. That's not the way most of these training programs work with folks.
I guess I'll do like a little shameless plug right now. So at Catalyst and Psych Collective, we actually do have a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy training, and it's something that we specifically curated because most of us had really horrible training experiences. And from the 3 cohorts that we've done thus far, the feedback we've gotten from people is that it actually does feel more like ceremonial than it does feel academic. Like, granted, we do have academic elements to it, but just the way it's set up, the information that we're sharing, and the flow of it is more heart-centered than it is like brain-centered, right? And so, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's a really phenomenal piece, and it does come from, unfortunately, traumatizing experiences in these trainings, and then also having people that are leading these trainings being honestly somewhat detached from the medicine is what I've experienced. So, yeah.
Anyway, so I want to leave a little bit of time for audience questions, but I just want to make sure everybody's speaking to what they want to speak to before we open it up. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Are there any questions for any of the panelists? Okay. I saw, yeah. Yeah, right in front, sitting down. Yeah, do you want to? Oh, yeah. So the question was, does anybody incorporate somatic therapy into their practice?
Yes, I do. Again, bias. I don't think that we necessarily can do healing work without bringing in the body. And specifically in this country, I think most people, considering the history of this country, the way that people have been able to move through the world in the way they do is to be completely dissociated from the body. And as we start to connect to our bodies, then we start to have to open ourselves up to dismantle a lot of the systems and a lot of the trauma within. Yeah.
Anybody else or any? Okay. Other questions? Yeah, there was, yeah. Okay. So question is, what are the specific chemicals that you use, and is there some that you like better than others?
I could just say that as it's not my decision, right? That it's the client seeking the medicine, and so it's really for the client to decide and to be the expert. And so I would, as a clinician, be really curious about how that person's being guided, what are they hoping for, and to allow them to be the expert. And maybe you have favorites.
Any other takers?
I mean, so when just saying it's like it's a bit of a fraught question, just because legally, the only like legal psychedelic that we can talk about is ketamine, and ketamine is not a psychedelic. So this is it's just an interesting place, right? I will say that people, not necessarily myself, because there's a camera there, use MDMA, MDA, DMT, and mushrooms, which include more than psilocybin. I think, yeah, each person needs something different, and each compound is different based off of chemistry, based off of growing patterns. You've got some mushroom growers here who will tell you, each mushroom has their own sort of spirit. So I think it's just it's like a mix and match. Like, what does a person need, and what's the best medicine for them at that time?
Okay, other questions? I want to make sure I'm getting the whole room. So yeah, let's maybe go over here. Yeah. Okay, I think I got it. So what was, sorry, have you always been practicing with chemical therapy, or when did you switch over to it? Did I get that right? Okay.
So for me, my personal story is that no, I I was a therapist and I'm fairly relational and I use a lot of different models depending upon who the client is. And my own personal journey with medicine and healing through medicine, I in a journey was told that I needed to figure out how to bring the medicine to Black people. And when that happened, when I had that journey and that happened, then I started my quest to find Black, because I didn't know any Black people in plant medicine world. And so then I started finding people, and then we have created a community where we're using medicine for healing, but that's not exclusively what I do. Most of my clients, well, actually that's not true. Most of my clients did do ketamine with ketamine protocol with me and then stayed, and they're still working with me as clients. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Do we have time for? Somebody else speaking to it?
Yeah, and similarly, I came up through the after having heroin addiction, going to rehab in a really extreme, like 12-step kind of, your best thinking got you here, right?
It's my jam.
Yeah. But there was all this fear in this rehab about, like, if you touch anything, you're fucked, right? Game over. And then I, and a little while after, and I'm like, a couple years completely sober for, doing the deal. And then my loved ones started to experience really severe treatment resistant depression. And they were like, I think I'm feeling called towards medicine work. And so I got to witness a transformation through underground medicine work of someone who I look up to and love and care about and deeply respect. And it like changed the game. You know what I mean? It was like there's this pathway to healing that doesn't only require you to get broken down and built back up. You know what I mean? And so that was my personal journey that inspired me.
And the difference between using a substance or a chemical or a plant for healing versus using it as a way to run away from myself.
Right.
And that's
right.
how I distinguished it to kind of reconcile if I was using, because it was really scary because of that fear base that we get
fear.
from, if you use anything, then you're fucked. And then, anyway, we're going to have more discussion after this.
Nice.
And just looking at what the offerings are with Western medicine and psychotropic or psychopharmacology, mood stabilizers, addiction medicine, and those kinds of things. They're symptom management. They're not like the healing aspect, like you said, with plant medicine. And often they're full of confounds and side effects, and almost, in some ways, damaging to a lot of patients.
Do we have time for one more? Okay, we have a couple more minutes. Yeah, I think you had one. Yeah. Those are the best ones. Okay, so the question was, how would you go about choosing a practitioner?
I mean this with all sincerity. Vibes.
Yes.
Like you have to like spend time with someone. I think I've already said it on the stage. Move at the speed of trust, right? And don't be quick to give up your trust, right? Like take your time. I mean, I know like the standard is like, you know, you have 2 pre-sessions and then the medicine session. You take as many pre-sessions as you need, right? And you get to know this person. One question I ask my own therapist when I have them, I'm like, tell me about a time when you fucked up. Let me know that we both know you're human because I'm human and you're human. You got 2 legs, 2 arms. So tell me about when you fucked up, right? So that we can like establish that rapport, can establish that trust. People do it in lots of different ways. I don't know if you have a priest. It's the same way I would treat like a priest in confession, right? Because I know enough priests. I'm like, but are you like, are you for real about your vows? Do you because this is my psyche you're playing with. This is my spirit that you're playing with, and I need to know that like you are not only going to protect me but help lead me. And if you can't do that, that's okay, but don't put yourself in that position, right? So I really think it's about checking the vibe on someone. Just because someone says, "Oh, okay," I will absolutely say this: do not sit with anybody you just met on Instagram. I was 110% because people are doing that shit now. It's confusing, right? Like, take your time, get to know folks, sit with them, walk with them, talk with them, eat with them, right? And if they're like, well, this isn't how we do it, I don't have the time for this, this is not my thing, that might not be your person.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I come back to often is the relational nature of the healing work, because so much of the suffering experienced by humans is done by other humans. And so having a person that you feel in your body safe with, confident in, comfortable with, hopeful around, can be the difference of turning the substance into a medicine that you carry with you for the rest of your life.
So it's hard for me to see the back. I don't know if anybody's raising their hands back there. I think we have time for at least one more. Okay, gentleman in the hat. Yeah. Yeah.
Like a training?
I would co-sign the catalyst, folks, 100%, for sure.
Should we repeat the question first? So,
Yeah.
sorry, it's a question for those who are therapists who want to get into like a practice that's less disease-based and more, I don't know what word you use. Okay, a training, yeah.
Yeah, and just to say, like I've had the privilege and honor of getting to know the Catalyst Insight Collective humans, and they are truly heart-led, competent, really knowledgeable people that take a lot of care and pride in their work and humility to their work. And so when they offer a training, I'm listening for it for sure and telling everybody I know.
Is it online or in person? It's here in this area? Yeah.
Talk to us if you want to do it. We'll get you in. Yeah.
Say that again?
Talk to us if you want to do it. We'll get you in. Yeah.
No, it's just, anyway, I live in California.
Yeah, and maybe another shameless plug is my colleague and co-founder at Expanse, Paula DeSanto. She is a trainer at the Psychedelic Somatic Interactional Psychotherapy Institute, and they do if somatic work is your jam, it's a body-based model that integrates medicine for healing. So that's another option. PSIP, and they actually do trainings all over the world, all over the country. I'll pass that along later.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have. So thank you so much. Yeah, we don't have time for more questions. Oh.
Charlotte, she does have a
All right, I'll repeat that on the mic. So psychedelic liberation training with Charlotte James. Yeah. All right, thank you. So that's another great one as well. All right, well, thank you everyone for having us. Yeah. If anybody else has questions, I don't know if people are open to just people coming up and talking to you afterwards, but I know I'm open to that. So yeah, I know we couldn't get to everything. So thank you very much.